It is interesting that Francesco Forgione became a son of St. Francis, taking the name of Pio as he entered the Capuchin order, and that he, like St. Francis, is one of the few in the clergy who have been known to have these stigmata. He was united to Christ in every possible way, and it's clear that he was a victim soul, and that the Lord does call some out of humanity to bear with him a part of the pain, and thereby to re-establish some kind of equilibrium. It's also what we're given to understand at Fatima, when the children were shown hell and also given information about wars. We see that penance, the offering up of prayer and mortification, does in some way counterbalance the power of Satan. It would seem also that wars and disasters come from original sin. There is a pattern, a cyclic pattern, in the history of humankind. Padre Pio was aware of things. He was aware of the danger impending with regard to disaster in the church and on the planet. He was aware of the gravity of the abuse of grace. Indeed, like Cure Vaz, who had similar gifts, we know that he was keen on warning about not misusing the application of the precious blood, for our forgiveness was at such a price that it should not be used as a rubber stamp for more sin. He demanded that there should be an engagement and a break with regard to the will. To give absolution easily and without that demand is to encourage towards sin. And he also was not keen on having people come out of curiosity alone. They might find that they were not heard in confession. They would have to come back in a better state of mind. He would get to the point and not waste words in the confessional. And he would insist on completeness, and should things be forgotten, we know well what he would do. And he was also a profound and keen and perceptive guide of souls. We have volumes of his correspondence. I have actually here whole volumes of letters by him. And he would come out with things which were gems. Vainglory is a sin proper to souls that have consecrated themselves to the Lord and who have given themselves to the spiritual life. Vainglory, it is a worm. It eats away silently. He, however, was a complete person and was not lacking in a twinkle of a sense of humour which would come out unexpectedly. He was also aware of the whole person, and hence he used the offerings that were coming in his direction to build the house for the relief of suffering, which began in 1956, against all odds given the poverty of the area. One time, a friend of his offered to take some of his pain upon him to help him, and he did, after being warned of what he was about to undertake. And it was so atrocious that he had to ask for it to be taken off. He just couldn't bear it. Padre Pio, we know, did not hurry at the altar. He would be with the angels there, and he would take 2 or 3 hours. And we know that those who were present felt something. It was Calvary on earth. A lesson also unto us in the use of those 2 sacraments. And I am sure that he would be horrified by some of the abuses that go on in our time. He would be clear, I'm quite sure, in expressing what he felt, what he knew. He himself obtained permission to celebrate the unchanged Mass that he knew. He died in 1968, as the changes were just beginning to come in. But we have so many accounts of his interventions, both during his life and after. I came across this the other day, which is puzzling. Two authoritative modern biographies that document an episode of some interest in particular are given in this account. It's Bernard Ruffin's Padre Pio, The True Story, and he himself, the author, is a Lutheran pastor. And Renzo Allegri's Padre Pio, Man of Hope. This latter is a respected Italian journalist. He interviewed people who interacted with Pio. In the case of the saint appearing in the sky, Allegri tracked down Dr. Bernardo Rossini, a general in the Air Force. And this witness testified as follows. After the war, I was serving in Bari at the United Air Command, which was responsible for all the new units that were created after Italy's defeat, and that operated side by side with the Air Force. The General Command for the US Air Force was also in Bari. I got to know several officers who told me that Padre Pio had saved them during one of their operations. Even the commanding general played a role in this incident, which was widely discussed. One day, he himself wanted to pilot a squadron of bombers on a mission to destroy a German munitions dump that was located near San Giovanni Rotondo. The general said that when he and his pilots were in the vicinity of the target, they saw the figure of a monk with upraised hands appear in the sky. The bombs broke loose from the plane on their own and fell in the woods, destroying the target without the pilots intervening. That evening, this episode was the main topic of conversation among the pilots and their officers. You can bet it was. That is why the story became legendary. The witnesses couldn't stop talking about it. Rossini continued, everyone wanted to know who the monk was. Someone told the commanding general that there was a monk who worked miracles living in San Giovanni Rotondo. He decided to go to San Giovanni Rotondo as soon as the country was liberated, to see if it was the same monk that he had seen in the sky. After the war, the general, accompanied by some of the pilots, went to the Capuchin monastery there. As soon as they entered the sacristy, they saw several monks and immediately recognized Padre Pio as the one they had seen in their planes. Padre Pio introduced himself and, putting his hand on the general's shoulder, said, "So you're the one who wanted to destroy everything." Overwhelmed by the monk's look and his words, the general knelt down in front of him. Padre Pio had spoken, as usual, in his dialect, but the general was convinced that the monk had spoken to him in English. The two became friends. The general, who was Protestant, later converted to Catholicism. We know that Padre Pio always had the rosary in his hands, and he would always be using every spare moment to recite it. It's amazing how he combined things. And he warned that it was a weapon, an arm, against the other guy. We know who he means. And that if we didn't use it to fire, the other one would. And so it is that it never left his hand. Apparently he was able to use it even when confessing, because as soon as people got to the point, it might be a few minutes, then he was able to carry on while having one ear open. It's amazing how he combined things, because the rosaries, he said, were very powerful, and he wouldn't let a single soul go out of his hands. And to that effect, he would sometimes bilocate and be present to a person who was dying. We know that, for instance, they had to keep his body warm with all kinds of blankets, but it was still freezing cold, and it turned out that he was bilocating on a mountain, preparing a person for death. And so it is that he knew what it meant to save a soul, and what true pastoral work was, and how the life of a priest should be consecrated. For every moment of a consecrated person's life is consecrated and belongs to the Church and to souls. A lesson, therefore, unto us who have to do both with the Eucharist and with souls in the sacrament of their healing and salvation. We had an old confessional in the monastery brought to us, and I might be cleaning it now and again, and it made me think about the way that it had heard so many sins over the centuries, and how in the word of a priest a soul could be cleansed, or if not prepared, sent back to come back in a better disposition. What a frightening word that would be, especially from someone like Padre Pio. It would put the person before its reality, lest it have any illusion. For to be in confession ultimately is to be before one's judge, and a foretaste of what it is to be before the judgment seat of the Alpha and Omega himself. I clean what shall clean all, that in a man and womankind is spread. For yesterday still travels through this grill, and no age can much alter what is here and came this way. I here recall what secrets could be heard but once upon this earth. I hear and see the liquid sins that in a word did melt and trickle down when grace was near. I see again the beauty of a soul, the ugliness of some, the peace withheld, for that the will was not, and that the whole would still be held a while. For I beheld, here set between heaven and earth, full foul fair things, for each that knelt I felt, where brimstone clings